Long before crowns symbolized authority, and long before armies enforced obedience, human minds were already under control, not through violence, not through punishment, but through meaning. Power did not always sit on a throne. Sometimes it lived inside stories. Because once a narrative takes root in the human mind, it begins to shape reality silently. It decides what feels natural, what feels dangerous, and what feels impossible to question. People rarely resist stories. They organize their lives around them. And the ones who shaped those stories controlled fear, admiration, morality, and loyalty without ever ruling openly. Tonight's story is not about fantasy or folklore. It is about the oldest psychological system ever created, a system so subtle that most civilizations never realized they were living inside it. This is the story of ancient storytellers, priests, poets, bards, shamans, and myth-makers who shaped entire civilizations without wearing crowns and without commanding armies. Part 1. Why stories came before power. Imagine a world without writing, no books, no records, no contracts, no written laws. Everything a society knew existed only in memory. If memory failed, culture vanished. In such a world, the most powerful individual was not the strongest fighter. It was the one who remembered, the one who could explain where humans came from, why pain existed, why authority mattered, what happened after death. Stories answered questions logic could not, and psychology explains why this mattered so deeply. The human brain evolved not to seek truth, but to seek coherence. We don't ask, is this accurate? We ask, does this make sense of my suffering? Stories do what facts cannot. They reduce anxiety. And the person who reduces anxiety becomes trusted. That trust becomes influence, and influence becomes power. Part 2. The brain does not think in facts. Modern neuroscience confirms something ancient cultures intuitively mastered. The brain is not a logic machine. It is a story engine. Stories activate multiple neural networks at once: emotion, memory, identity, morality. Facts activate one area. Stories activate the whole mind. This is called narrative transportation. When people enter a story, their critical thinking weakens, resistance drops, beliefs slip in quietly. That's why ancient myths didn't argue, they immersed. You weren't told what to believe, you were shown who you were. And once identity is shaped, behavior follows automatically. Part 3. Myths as social operating systems. Today, myths are treated like entertainment. In the ancient world, myths were instruction manuals. They explained who deserved power, who must obey, what behavior was honorable, what behavior was shameful. This is known as psychological norm internalization. When rules are embedded in stories, they feel natural, not imposed. In Egypt, the myth of Mot taught that order was sacred. In Mesopotamia, stories framed humans as servants of gods. In Greece, myths warned against questioning destiny. In Rome, legends glorified sacrifice for the state. These narratives didn't describe reality, they manufactured it. Part 4. Authority bias, the first mental hack. Ancient storytellers mastered a powerful cognitive shortcut: authority bias. Humans instinctively trust information that appears to come from a higher source. So storytellers removed themselves from the narrative. They didn't say, "This is my idea." They said, "The gods revealed this." In Egypt, Thoth spoke through priests. In Greece, the muses whispered to poets. In Sumer, myths descended from the heavens. Once a story becomes divine, disagreement becomes dangerous. Questioning it is no longer intellectual, it becomes moral failure. This is how stories became untouchable. Part 5. Egypt, when myth became government. Ancient Egypt perfected narrative control. Their central story was simple but devastatingly effective. The universe survives only through order. That order is fragile, and chaos is always waiting. This taps into existential anxiety, the fear that reality itself could collapse. Order was called Mot, and who maintained Mot? The pharaoh. From childhood, Egyptians absorbed a single psychological frame. Obedience equals cosmic stability. Disobedience equals universal collapse. Rebellion was not political crime, it was existential threat. This is known as moral framing, turning authority into ethical necessity. Part 6. The priests, the architects of perception. Here is the hidden truth. Pharaohs did not invent these stories. Priests curated them. They controlled education, calendars, rituals, temples, myth repetition. They decided which versions survived. This is memory control. Psychologically, repeated narratives become internal truths. The brain mistakes familiarity for accuracy. After centuries of repetition, myths stopped feeling taught. They felt obvious. Part 7. Rome, identity as a weapon. Rome advanced storytelling further. Roman myths didn't emphasize wisdom, they emphasized duty. Every story carried the same message: the individual exists for the state. This exploits group identity psychology. Once people fuse identity with a group, self-sacrifice becomes voluntary. Rome didn't need to force loyalty. People desired it. Dying for Rome felt meaningful because stories taught them that meaning. Part 8. Bards were walking media networks. In oral cultures, storytellers were living archives. Bards memorized history, genealogies, victories, failures, and they controlled reputation. If a bard praised you, you became immortal. If a bard mocked you, you were erased. This triggered social legacy anxiety. Humans fear how they'll be remembered more than how they'll suffer. Warriors obeyed not just kings, but the stories that would survive them. Part 9. The 5 psychological tools of myth. Ancient narratives used 5 consistent mechanisms. Repetition, familiarity creates belief. Emotion, fear and awe bypass logic. Symbolism, symbols speak to the subconscious. Authority framing, divine sources eliminate debate. Identity binding, this is who you are. This is identical to modern propaganda. Nothing changed, only the medium evolved. Part 10. The most dangerous story ever told. The most powerful myth is not about gods. It is this. This is the natural order. Once people believe this, imagination collapses. Change feels immoral. Rebellion feels insane. Questioning feels wrong. Ancient storytellers used this constantly, and modern systems still do. Final reflection. Who controls your stories? So ask yourself, who defines heroism today? Who decides what is shameful? Who frames what is normal? Because the moment you see the story, you weaken its control. And that is why ancient storytellers hid behind gods. Because once the storyteller is revealed, the spell breaks. If this made you think differently, you're already stepping outside the story. Subscribe for more hidden histories. Leave your thoughts below.
because the greatest empires were not built with stone. They were built inside the human mind.